One. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 6. We're officially at the halfway point of the fall 2021 xAPI cohort. We're really excited to be here today, and we have a great presentation. Feel free to use the chat to connect with us a little bit, share a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, the pronouns that you use, what you prefer to be called, what organization you're with, and maybe what team you're a part of as we are underway with our teams. I'm Jess Jackson. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. Feel free to call me Jess, and I am the xAPI cohort host. Again, like I said, we're in week 6. So this is our 6th web session. If you haven't been catching our web sessions, you can feel free to catch those on YouTube. And we load them weekly on our website. This web session is recorded for that purpose. We want to make sure that we're able to share out this content and these thought leaders to our full community, even those who might not be able to join us on Thursday afternoons. If you want to talk up today's session, feel free to tag xAPI Gnome and Rusticy Software. We're really excited for today's chat, and I'll hop right in. So from last week, we've had 15 new folks join cohort, which just gets right into the point that we're never too late to cohort. Our community is constantly growing, and we welcome folks to join in as they can. And if they just are here to observe or lurk, they can do that as well. Today, our presentation is how to bridge the SCORM and xAPI divide with CMI5 with Chris Tompkins and George Vilches. And we are excited to continue on our semester. Again, I'm Jess Jackson. I am your host, and I have Jamie Washington with me today as our producer. And if you have any technical difficulties or struggling to get access, feel free to contact Jamie, and she can support you throughout the session. Again, I want to reiterate that you're never too late to cohort. Cohort is a flexible learning community, and we welcome anyone to join any of our teams at any time. That's really important for both new folks who are coming into cohort, but also for our teams to recognize that you might have flow of people in and out as you're working on your projects, and being able to allocate and share experiences is going to be a really key part of this learning experience. So every week I go over a little high-level overview of what xAPI cohort is. And the reason I do this is because we're such a flexible learning community. We want to make sure that folks have access to this information and know where we are in the semester. So if you've heard this before, I apologize. If not, welcome, welcome, welcome. You're always welcome, and this is for you. So the xAPI Learning Cohort is a free, virtual, vendor-neutral, although very vendor-supported, 12-week learning by doing project-based learning experience and community. It happens in 2 key areas. The first area is right here on our weekly web sessions at 2 o'clock. And these recordings are shared freely and widely on Twitter, on our website, and in our weekly updates that go out on Fridays. In addition, cohort is happening in our project teams, and our project teams forum on Slack and also have a GitHub page, and then work wherever. And then again, every week we send out a weekly update with the web session recordings for you. We are right smack dab in the middle of cohort today. So we have been learning where teams are, getting team traction for the last couple weeks. And we are learning about how to bridge the SCORM and xAPI data divide with CMI5 today. Next week, we'll hop into data ethics, and then we'll get into some xAPI and the AI potential. And we'll wrap up our web sessions with content in that way from with xAPI and Friends and how the standard fits into the larger learning ecosystem. The last 3 weeks of our cohort web sessions are focused on demos and case studies so that you can see that application of xAPI. With that, I'm going to pass over the mic to Chris and George, and I'm excited to learn with you today, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time looking at that agenda. What a cool list of humans. I know most of them, and they are certainly the leading experts on all of these things. So it's flattering for George and I to get to shares such a good opportunity. We love the cohort. We've been supporting it since its inception, and I'm always excited to see what huge numbers you guys are putting up in terms of attendance. This is great. I'm super excited, and you're my people. At this point in your progress, we're going to get into some of the tools that are being used. So, hi, everybody. I'm Chris from Rusticy. I've brought along George with me as well, and we're going to explore a little bit about SCORM, xAPI, CMI5. Why do we keep talking about these things? What kind of problems do they actually solve? So as we dive in, George, let's go forward one. Today, we're going to talk about CMI5. What is this thing? Why are we talking about it so much? How does it actually help us get from where we are today to where we all want to be? What is the state of its adoption? And then the thing I think you're going to be most excited about, some tools to go play with on the other side of this discussion. So George, if we could go forward one, tools in the toolbox. I use this analogy a lot, and I think it fits particularly well in today's discussion. But when I'm working on my car, I can grab a screwdriver, a socket, or a wrench. And it's unfair to say that they're all the same tool, even though they all turn a threaded bolt. One is going to be way easier to use than another, depending on the situation you find yourself in. And SCORM, xAPI, CMI5, these are different tools in the toolbox. There are AICC and a bunch of others out there, but they're designed to solve a problem. And being an efficient practitioner in these standards means that knowing when to grab one tool over another makes you really skilled at your job. So SCORM is where we're from. The MP3 is something that the music industry uses widely, so you can save a file as an MP3, and George and I could start a band and mix the song together on my Mac using GarageBand, or step into a studio in Nashville and use Pro Tools. But the MP3 is a file that moves between devices, and when somebody hits the triangle button, it plays the way it's supposed to play and tracks the way it's supposed to track. SCORM has been doing that for the e-learning industry for many, many years now. SCORM is a file that moves between applications, can be authored by a number of tools and played in a number of LMSs, and it always renders on the screen the way that we want, babysits the learner, and surfaces what I like to call the big four: time, completion, pass, fail, score. It is very valuable and has been widely used throughout the industry. xAPI was created to help two applications talk nicely to one another through the noun verb object structure that I'm sure you guys have caught on to by now. So SCORM was really good for loading things into an LMS, tracking the big four. xAPI is better at just tracking arbitrary things from outside of a browser, but those things don't always link up neatly together. SCORM can't do anything that's not in an active web browser session. xAPI doesn't have a launchable moment. So George, take us a step forward. Let's look at CMI5. This is designed to solve that kind of mismatch. We want to do arbitrary things. We want to be able to communicate freely and all of this weird stuff, but we've got to have something the LMS can click play on. So xAPI is a profile. It's an extra set of rules. It ensures that we can plug and play things together, and it's designed specifically when something of authority needs to launch a piece of content. So, components. You have to have a course package and a structure to the course, to the thing, to the simulator, the activity, whatever we're learning. You need to have an LMS that's an authority that can manage who sees what, who needs to take what, in what order. And we need to have an LRS for obvious reasons. You guys are already up to speed there. And then the magic thing that CMI5 brings to the table is this AU, assignable unit. This gives us a thing to move around, to assign, to launch, and to interact with. So George, let's go forward. So here's a comparison chart. We'll save these slides. These things often work better when you've got a second to parse everything. But you'll notice a mismatch between SCORM and xAPI. A lot of the benefits of one didn't stack neatly with another, and CMI5 helps unify these things together. As a guy who's been playing with e-learning standards, specifically SCORM mostly, for the last 10 or 11 years, to get to this state where everything everybody wants is unified under this one approach makes me really excited. All right, George. So this is a cool diagram, although it's hard to parse at the beginning. If you look at the bottom, this kind of helps you line up where the different standards help things. And you'll notice that the LMSs can struggle with some of these mobile apps, serious game simulations, the tracking data that we want can often be hard to find, and SCORM and xAPI push off to each side of this continuum. But xAPI is hanging out, trying to accommodate everyone's interests in what we want to launch from, what we want to track, and how we want it to flow inside what has become a quilt work of different e-learning tools that many different organizations, businesses, and groups have. All right, George, let's go on one more. So CMI5 takes us this step further, this place that I've wanted us to be for a long time. And that's where we can get the ability to have an LMS launch a thing, pass through a learner ID, understand a structure of what needs to happen and the sequence in which that learning experience can occur. A firmer way to say the big four. Whether we're taking a modern e-learning course, an AR, VR thing, break out our number 2 pencils and fill out a Scantron sheet, take a handwritten essay, or just check your knowledge in the hallway after this call, we're in a situation where you've got to know the big four every time. Are you working on this or are you done? Did you pass or did you fail? What was your score? And if I spent 2.5 hours and George spent 2.5 seconds, well, that's interesting too. So the big four become a fundamental thing that most professionals measuring learning and training want to see. This gives us that structure, but it also waives the structured tracking. It turns out sometimes, well, this would be a nice to have, just go read that PDF, but you don't have to take it. And CMI5 can allow for that too. We get to launch with more control from an LMS. And I think that this solves a lot of the pedagogical approach or the instructional design characteristics that modern e-learning professionals want out of a learning and training simulator type of experience. All right, George. So Catapult. This is the reason we made t-shirts. We unveiled a lot of this internally today at Rusticy. We worked with ADL, the Department of Defense group that's ultimately the keepers of the SCORM, AICC, xAPI, CMI5 standards. And we're really excited over the last couple of weeks. We've advanced this through Project Catapult. Thank you to ADL. They get a lot of credit for this, all of it really, but they helped drive forward a process that took us a year of collaborating together to build a CMI5 player prototype to give instructional designers something to work against if you need a player of your own to see how your own content is working. We built a CMI5 conformant test suites, 2 of them really. One for content, make sure that this thing is passing a check to that it is rendering and playing and tracking the way that it needs to. And also a test suite for people who build their own CMI5 player, either off the prototype or on their own, to make sure that your player is following the rules and can check things. Knowing where headaches lie is key, and having these test suites helps both content creators and players agree that they're doing the things that are expected. We've created a sample CMI5 course template. We'll include a link. You guys should play with these. They're benchmarking courses. They're related to rocks because that's the degree in which the CMI5 standard is hardening itself. And then we've also created a really valuable guide for people using these tools to implement, to build, to work on, and those resources are available for the community as well. So this page excites me. These are the things that we've birthed over the last year, and I hope you can all take advantage of them. George. The importance of testing. We deal with headaches all day at Rusticy Software. Our attitude is ask us anything really. If you run into technical headaches, you should send them our way. The importance of this is to make sure that people building content are doing the things they expect to be doing and have a degree of certainty that they've done the right things, and to help the people building players with that same moment so that when something doesn't go right, we have objective ways. Facts are friendly moments to determine what is best. George, take us through the content test suite, please.
You've got it. And as I see in chat, yes, indeed, you can play with it. I'm going to show some of it off today, and all of it is available for you to go run off and play with it yourself as soon as we're done here. So let's jump right in. The Catapult, the CMI5 Catapult Content Test Suite, I know that's a mouthful, so from now on I'm just going to call it CTS, is a simple platform for deploying your packaged or remote CMI5 learning content, being able to create a test history, and then validate for conformance all of the content you're producing. I say remote because right off the bat, as we get into what would you do with something like with the CTS, you're going to load a course into it. But loading a course, for those of you who have done SCORM before, have done xAPI before, you can start with the zip package. Just upload a zip package here. But nowadays with CMI5, you have another option. You can put in the CMI5 manifest, just like the SCORM manifest of old, in here, and that CMI5 manifest can point to remote resources. The whole CMI5 standard works completely remotely. That's super exciting. There's so many things that enables, and the CTS will let you test your material right in that context. Now, I'm not going to try to upload something right now. I'm going to launch some pre-existing things I've loaded in here. So when we go in, the first thing we can look at from a course perspective is we can see the structure of the package we've loaded. And as you drill into each one, you can see the properties that go along with that CMI5 experience. The AU, these are the launchable pieces. These are not the structural and organizational parts. These are the ones that actually contain content that can be deployed. So your packages have all those traditional things you expect. What's the launchable HTML bit? How's it going to load? More on this in a minute. What satisfies this package? That gives you the general layout. But we can get right into testing. Now, whenever you're testing, you always have to have some sort of user to test as. This randomize button may be my favorite testing button in the entire product, because this guy right here, you'll never fill in these properties unless you're doing it for a specific reason for your logging archival purposes. But other than that, once you start that test, you get to this view. This shows you each of the available assignable units. And with these available assignable units, you've got both the description of who you're launching it as and their details. You've got the configuration around that as defined by that manifest. But let's just get right into launching one and see what happens. Now, I'm cheating a little bit in this presentation. I'm showing off the example templates. We'll come back around to those in a minute. So we've got these example templates here that generate a bunch of xAPI statements that are actually CMI5 statements. We subscribe to the CMI5 profile as part of this experience. And as we generate these statements, you can see we're recording statements here to the LRS that we are playing the CTS on. CTS does not live in a vacuum. It has to be on a CMI5 conformant LRS. So all these statements here, they're also going to show up in your LRS. So if I use just an LRS around here, you'll notice that these statements we've been generating are showing up right here in our SCORM Cloud version. So we come back here, we experience this content a little bit, we go ahead and we try to get it completed. Fantastic, we've passed it. You can see that the statements were being sent over to the remote LRS. We exit it, and we also get another important part of the CMI5 experience, the return URL. When you're leaving courses, now in SCORM and other standards, there wasn't a way to control what happened when you left the experience in a meaningful LMS, non-LMS centric way. This is now a part of the standard, so you can always exit in a more reasonably controlled manner. Now that we've exited, we've got conformance. And not only do we have conformance of this assignable unit, you can see that conformance rolls up into the main, into the full package, because in this single AU case, whenever you get satisfaction on the AU, satisfaction rolls all the way up for every block that contains all those AUs and every course that contains those blocks. More importantly, though, you've got this right here, this registration log. This is a downloadable artifact. Well, the registration log shows you what you saw in play without this, but the equivalent of this is the downloadable artifact that you can then take and keep as a history of all of the course testing you've done over time with all of your test learners. You can also deliver this when you're building content for customers. You now have a way to take this content and hand them a report afterwards that says, not only do we build the content correctly, the CTS says we did it for sure. Here's the proof. And they can take it and they can follow the same steps and they can get the same results. So you've got repeatability as part of your way of managing, deploying, and running all this content. That is the whirlwind, very highest sweep of all the things the CTS can do. We'll come back in here in just a moment. But first, so with a tool that can actually test CMI5 courses, great, we've got a lot to love. Uh, as Chris already said, there's real advantages to CMI5 and what it gives us in capability to do, how it provides more modern sensibilities to the way we deploy content and operate it. But we all have budgets, we all have other pressing concerns. So getting your content onto CMI5 isn't just a immediate jump on it sort of thing. Here's some of the questions you can ask yourself about future direction and maybe when you can slip it in. If you already have something that can launch CMI5 packages, if you have authoring tools that publish CMI5, just try them out. There's no risk in doing that. You might get the benefits right off the bat. Some tools are already there. We'll talk more about that in a minute. If you have specific use cases, for instance, are you finally in that position where you want to get more data about what learners are doing in their courses? Well, xAPI we know is great for that. CMI5 lets you make it into a launchable experience in an LMS while you can still use xAPI to get that additional data. Of course, the DoD says, the government standard of what we should be doing for e-learning. It says use xAPI, use CMI5. Well, that's a great reason all by itself. More people you can sell to. And then my personal favorite, the one that I am, as a longtime SCORM developer and supporter, really looking forward to, is I have been up to my eyeballs in support requests surrounding pop-ups, having them, not having them, mobile devices, desktops, the browser, matrix, whatever that may be. CMI5 lets you, as the content author, tell the LMS whether or not to use a pop-up. So for that, you're welcome. We're super excited about that. Okay, so we already talked about using the CTS to test content. As part of CMI5 Catapult, we produced some example content to give you guidance around what it is that, both when you're converting your existing content or you want to build things from scratch, some of the top level things you're likely to want to do in your own content building experience. And so for that, we're going to go back to the CTS and dig in a little bit here. You can see that I've got all these introduction to geology courses structured in different ways. I showed you what we call the frame style before. That's an older style, traditionally very scalable learning experience. Then we also have a more responsive style. This is a more modern look and feel take on producing e-learning. So when I do a test here, you'll notice it has a different look as I change the size of my browser. And oh my gosh, the sharing software is doing an admirable job of actually making this work. You can see it goes into mobile-like views. So we're using we're using different views, but the rendering and the operations of this are still the same. The JavaScript libraries that are powering this do it the same way no matter what design we put on. That was on purpose. It gives you a model to work on for how you separate your data and your UI experience. Otherwise, we've got some interesting things going on in these examples. For instance, we've got this video here. You'll see that as the video is going on, as I interact with it, we're generating xAPI statements in the xAPI video profile. And if I cheat right now and I go back to SCORM Cloud, you can see I've got these video-based statements, and we know a little bit about how to format them in a nice way. But they are CMI5 allowed statements that also match the xAPI video profile. That combination is super important. You can combine profiles, which means you can do lots more interesting data reporting. So otherwise, CMI5 is named based on rock hardness. So this is a all geology focused course. We're moving away from golf and we're moving on to rocks. In this particular model, we've got this is a completion based on quiz score. One of the nice little cheats we've added in, easy to press buttons to get your way through getting it all right or getting it all wrong. So I'm going to fail this time around and submit. And I've done terribly, but you can see we've got our failed statement here. Now, when we exit this course, I didn't get a non-conformance indicator here. I get result pending because it's okay for students to fail. Failing isn't a conformance problem. Failing is just your learners working through the material. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to relaunch it. This is going to demonstrate when we relaunch it here, we're presented with bookmarking options. So we have explanations here of how to do bookmarking as part of the workflow of what these example templates can show off for you. So I'll resume from where I left off. I'll get them all right this time. And now we've got this. We're tracking the pass, the completion. The exit is doing the proper return URL process. So we're modeling a lot of CMI5 techniques as part of these templates. Excuse me. You'll see now we've got our conformant checkmark like we talked about before. So these are a couple of the styles, but we also have structural differences. We've got the multi-AU courses. When I say multi-AU, what I mean is we've got lots of different launchable elements in here. And each launchable element comes with its own piece. Again, it comes with its own config as well. Satisfaction rules can be different based on each launchable element. So if I get in, I do test, and we run this, you can see now we've got all of these separate things as launchable. Each one can have a custom config if you want to change the pop-up behavior. So if I choose new window this time, and I hit launch, we get it. Luckily, it didn't actually go into a new window, but it gave it to a new tab within this window, which is my browser's configuration. It's still all the same content. It's still all the same layout. Everything is working the same. And if we sneak back into the CTS, there you go. There's all the same statements that we're generating from this experience. So I'm going to close out of here. This is the, oh, sorry. When you look here, we now see we've got conformance for this one item. We would have to go through all of these. And if we complete all of these successfully, then this top level item would also become conformant. And that download, that again, would reflect that for multiple AUs just as much as it reflected for single AUs. All right. That's a lot of tooling. We've showed you the tip of the iceberg with Catapult and the CTS, these content examples. There's an LTS, that's the LMS test suite. There's a player that powers this content test suite that is a prototype of how you would build a CMI5 player into an LMS-like experience. So there's lots of great technology pieces here, but that is so little compared to the total amount of things we've got to talk about here. There's so much written literature about all things CMI5, application installation and operation documentation. The course examples have documents describing how you can use them in an LMS, how they're structured, how those pieces can guide you for your own custom content development. And on top of all of this, we have the absolute best part. We've got a best practices guide. This was a huge effort, and it was spearheaded by our own Alicia Pack. Thank you, Alicia, so much. And this covers everything about how everything you can think of about CMI5. This is the acquisition guidance for content and LMS, for people who are acquiring content in LMSs, the best ways to maximize capability of CMI5 usage in your content. If no matter what job role you have, there's going to be a section of this book that almost assuredly applies to you. Find it, give it a read. It's a little bit of time with a huge outcome in getting ready to talk about CMI5. So I've showed it off, but you can go do this yourself. The GitHub repo has already been pasted in chat. You can go to that GitHub repo, follow the docs. That'll let you get the CTS and run it. As of today, there's no shared CTS out on the web that you can hop on and use, so you do have to set up your own. I would strongly recommend you follow the Docker model if you're going to run it locally. It's the easiest. It is just, if you don't have Docker installed, that's also really easy. Just trust me, go that model. You'll need an LRS to pair with it. There's a CMI5 adopters list on the CMI5 standards website. Some of the people who are on that list are pictured here. Go look. Now, I just want to be clear, we're not specifically recommending any LRS or any product around that because conformance testing has not yet started officially. We've got all the tools out there, and these LMSs and LRSs that have been contributing to these standards for a while are probably doing it exactly right, but there's the LTS is not generating artifacts yet that are being confirmed by a standards body. So they're good and they're out there. And if you start using the LTS, help us to get these people to work out a validation process so we can get conformance across the industry. Okay, so that's exactly where we need to go. We need all of you to help make CMI5 a reality. Look at your current workflow, look at the things you're doing and where CMI5 can be an integral part. How are you going to get launchable things that aren't just I'm taking some standards training in the browser. You're launching things in other experiences on mobile devices and such. Talk to your internal people, talk to your external people, your platform vendors about how you might want to use CMI5 to get fancier and do more interesting things. Learning standards adoption is like a snowball down a mountain. Every little bit it rolls further, it picks up more, it gets more mass, it gets more speed, and then everybody will want to jump on. Folks like you here today are the people who are going to make that happen. So You thought I'd already linked you to a bunch of great things. Here's even more great things. Catapult's a living project. We've got multiple places where the news about Catapult's coming out. Keep an eye on those spaces for what's going to come next. Check out the Catapult GitHub repo. Come to the CMI5 working group meetings. It's weekly Fridays at 10:30 Eastern. Everybody there is really interested in what people in the industry are trying to do with CMI5 today. They love to answer questions. They want your feedback. It's intentionally a very interactive meeting. Show up and be loud about it. We're excited. And last but not least, if you're going to be at DevLearn or ITSEC conferences this fall, we're bringing CMI5 related sessions to both. We'd love to see you there. And so with that, we really appreciate all the time you've given us. And as we always say, ask us anything. I see the chat has been going crazy, so start right now, put your questions in, and we'll answer them. So Chris, has anything exciting come up in the chat questions you'd like to take on?
There is a little here. Let's see. Does the CTS run off a Node.js server?
If you're particularly adept at deploying things, you could deploy the CTS and the player. They're all JavaScript Node applications. So yes, you could deploy a standalone Node two Node applications and the database that goes with it, which is, I believe, MySQL, and run all those things independently. That having been said, please use the Docker environment until you're comfortable with how everything's set up. The Docker Compose files will get it all laid out and deployed for you. It'll give you a nice, here's how everything communicates with one another. And then if you're feeling super adventurous past that point, sure, go to town. It's all node based.
Gotcha. All right. Is there a path or tool to convert SCORM packages to CMI5? That's a pretty great question. George, have you seen any? I know we're early days. This is days old. Any advice there?
There is. All right. So the engineer in me and the the more general chatter in me has two different answers to that. Are there any tools out there today that are doing a meaningful job at this topic? No. Would I even recommend you try as a like a direct one-to-one conversion? There isn't a clear path for that. Yes, CMI5 has initialize and terminate. SCORM has initialize and terminate. There's a lot of ways that you can hiccup this process and the way SCORM used to do things, the way CMI5 now does things, that makes a plain conversion an extremely gnarly problem. To give, this is a group that's building things. CMI5 has some very specific rules. You can't send a failed followed by a passed in the same session, one of those two at a time. You can't send passed twice. You can't send failed twice. These are all rules you have to follow as part of doing CMI5. So in SCORM, you could send all those things as many times as you wanted, and the LMS would just deal with whatever the last one that showed up was, or ignore them all if you had a mastery score. CMI5 also has mastery scores and has kind of a similar approach. So could you build a wrapper or something that helped you do like a just SCORM to CMI5 conversion? Theoretically possible. No one's done it yet, and we think it requires a slightly more hand curated touch on your content to do it. But the rules still apply. If you have a library, and the example templates show this off, we have the top level course player. We have a bottom level CMI5 JS library that comes from the Rusty suite. It's open source, it's Apache licensed. You'll find it in NPM. And in between, there's an adapter layer that connects the two together. It's all in very plain, easy to read JavaScript. That adapter layer kind of tells a story where if you had something built in SCORM, here's kind of what it would look like if you were replacing that adapter chunks with CMI5 equivalents. So look at the example templates. They'll give you a great model to think about what a conversion tool like that might do.
Great. Thanks, George. I'm going to go one more question. There was a good one here. When you were talking about the multi-AU courses, George, do you have to structure your course to accommodate these automatic buttons like correct, incorrect options? And how do multi-SCO courses generally behave in CMI5?
Okay. So the automatic buttons for all pass and all fail, we spend an awful lot of time helping people learn how to use content. A lot of time. And some of our, especially our very long-term support people, have been using our golf courses for about a decade or more now, and they're very tired of answering that quiz. So those buttons are just JavaScript that fills in the form before we submit it, so to make their lives easier and people trying to use the general model here. You don't need to do that at all. CMI5 doesn't proscribe anything about the look and feel of the experience. It's a very specific set of rules about how you launch it, how you do the xAPI communications, and how you exit it. That's hand waving away a few things, but the idea is it's not how it looks, it's how it operates under the covers. As far as multi-AU courses, multi-AU courses are very much supported. In fact, the specs-based rule on the topic is you must, as an LRS or as a CMI5 player and LRS, support 1,000 AUs at minimum. It's just basically a hand waving towards infinite AUs is required. They had to put a number on it somewhere, so they put a ridiculously high number. Multi-AUs are an intended model for how all this works. CMI5 does not have a sequencing model today. But to kind of pick up from a related question, can you do inter-AU communication? You can do it in the way that xAPI already lets you do it. If you can talk to an LRS, you can, and you know the name of the other thing you're asking questions about, you can use the xAPI statement API to get whatever statements may be relevant from one AU to another AU. That knowing exactly what to do with that, how to do with that, that's a relatively advanced topic, but it is completely possible.
Nice. I think we have time for one more. I like this one. In Catapult or the content testing suite, why conformance instead of complete? Is that the CMI5 term, a CTS term, or what's up with that?
Conformance is a word we have been beating the drum of for a very long time, since the SCORM days for sure. This is just the idea that you satisfy all the rules that the standard provides. And those rules don't say that completion is necessarily required. So when I look at this configuration right here, the move on rule, this is the thing in CMI5, we have a word called satisfaction. How do we know that the AU is done in a meaningful way? And move on defines what will cause satisfaction to occur. Not applicable just means the act of it existing automatically counts as satisfied. But otherwise, we've got passed and completed and then some combination of those things. So completed isn't really a great word to describe how we're checking that whether or not this AU met the rules of CMI5, because completed itself is a standards word that describes a particular user or learner-based experience. Conformance is the overall word that fits all the possible ways the learner can get through. Do we handle those situations correctly?
All right. So I want to be respectful of our time, and I think we're right at where we wanted to be. There are still some lingering questions here. We've captured them. We're happy to answer them one-on-one. We're always available. info@rusticysoftware.com comes to me, and I give things to George like right away every day. So please, guys, if you have questions, if there are things we can do to answer the weird corners of this topic, this is what we get excited about. So please, please, please ask us anything, really. It's a true statement, and it's how we find the edges of some of these situations. The things we've talked about today are days old, so we're going to find the right road with all of these tools and the right ways to use them. I'm super excited that you guys are involved, that there's so many of you here in this cohort, and that this continues to grow. Y'all are my people, so let us know what we can do to help you out. We're always happy to jump in.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, George and Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna hop back into the cohort business section of our web session. Thank you again for that presentation and your thoughts, and for something new. We got to experience something new at Cohort. That's so exciting. So we're going to hop into where your team should be now. As I said, we are in week 6 of a 12-week cohort, which means we're smack dab in the middle. So your teams should be working on their projects, scoping, assigning tasks, meeting. I went through and cleaned up our Slack channels to see which teams are actually making movement. And I also noticed some of the teams that are in GitHub that are providing updates weekly don't yet have a Slack channel. So if in the next week we can get the Slack channels up for your teams, that would be awesome. Right now, I'm going to ask that any folks that are here to speak on behalf of their teams, please raise your hand so that we can get you ready to share out your business about Cohort. So I'm seeing Brian. Okay. I'm going to hop onto GitHub. All right. So, Brian, if you want to go ahead and come, you're up first in the queue.
How did that happen?
I can sort of hear you, Brian, but then I think we lost some audio.
Hello, this is Brian.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. There we go. I had to find the button. So this is Brian Duck. I just met today with the National Guard for planning events relating to a large exercise next spring known as Northern Exposure. And it is an emerging thing that we may be able to use some xAPI for assessments during that. So that may turn into a spring activity. So apologies for going off on a tangent to begin with, but here we are. So the update for the xAPI profile week 8 is up on the screen. First off, I want to mention that the content URL there, the first one links directly to our team page in GitHub. The second one is how the xAPI cohort projects this. Either one of them will get you to our content, and the point I mentioned that is because the links in either of these pages are live. So accomplishments for the week. We held our first meeting last Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The first video is up on YouTube. We set up a YouTube channel, and the link again is on those 2 URLs if you'd rather use that than what you see in the page for the YouTube, which is rather confusing and challenging to type. The other thing to mention is the agenda that we covered. We reviewed the team purpose, discussed the group purpose, reviewed the existing cohort tools, and talked about goals and set timing. We set the agenda for the next meeting. Jason Haig will be working with us tonight at 6 p.m. to talk through the Navy or NETC documents that have been published. They're actually good standard documents as well as use of profiles. And he will help us to tour the xAPI profile server. Again, that's tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oops, I got it different in 2 places. It's actually still daylight time. And the link, details of the link are in the profile Slack channel, xAPI-profile Slack channel. We'll see if someone can pull it from there and put it into the chat so people who aren't in our Slack channel yet might have access if they want it. Areas where we need support. Part of the process is we're asking subject matter experts like Jason to join us and discuss the profile server, the NETC or Navy standards, and examples of profiles in action. So we're going to reach out to Aaron Silvers next and see what his availability is. So we'll be setting up a meeting. I plan to set up a meeting with him if he's available in the future. And what do we hope to accomplish for next week? First item will be breathe. It's been a challenging cycle. The next part of the plan is to host another meeting, check in on statuses with the team, and hopefully schedule another subject matter expert, like I mentioned. So part of our process is to help sort of shepherd us as we're wading into using profiles. The other thing I've found is that we've had, I don't want to call her out, but she might not be upset. Judy has reached out and said she's interested in building a profile for the Pebble project. So I've also sort of dual rolled and reached out to the team down under as they are building a geolocation profile. So I'm multitasking. If you have interested in building one, I'd recommend we have you talk with team down under. But if you're interested in seeing how to use a profile, that's more what this group is about. So Judy has actually mentioned that she's willing to go through the process of building that profile and sharing it with our group. So that may also be the accomplishments for upcoming weeks. Any questions of me? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Ilona?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So, so our task this week was to start experimenting and send statements, and that's what we've been doing. I think many people are just pulling hair and suffering quietly. It's been pretty quiet at the channel. We've been asking questions, and Matthew has been helping us. So learning and experimenting, and everybody's building their own project, so we don't have like a common one project. So it's a little bit like we share what we do and we share our problems and ask for advice. And next week, I think we'll continue this work and see if we get anywhere with this. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Liz? Hey, Liz, I think you're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep. And can you remind me which team you're presenting for?
Sure, it's CMI5 Create AU.
Perfect.
Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Liz. I'm one of 4 current team members in this project, and our main purpose for this cohort at least is just to get acquainted with CMI5 and what it has to offer. So this session today was actually pretty perfect, so thank you to George and the rest of the team for being here and definitely answering some of our questions. So the goal for this session of the cohort is really to just create one assignable unit package and try to get it through to the conformance suite and test it out and see where we can improve. We're going to be creating a storyline mini course with videos, with draggable units, with testing and various items like that we can basically assign xAPI statements to. And then Brian Duck is also going to create a similar one on Adobe Captivate. So then we're going to try to contrast and see what passes and what fails. In the future, for phase 2, which will most likely be for the spring cohort, our plan is to essentially maybe create some sort of a JavaScript remote game that we can then pass through the conformance suite to try to see if we can, in fact, basically see the CMI5 promise fulfilled, where you're passing LMS and non-LMS related content. So again, this is all new to us. We're just trying to learn, and we welcome anyone and everyone who wants to join us. And we're on the Slack channel. And always available. So welcome to anybody that wants to join us.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. And then we are not having from the electronic performance support system update loaded, but I'll stop sharing my GitHub screen and hop back into my presentation. So that way we can wrap up today's session. All righty. So I have gone through and cleaned up a bit our, oh, wow, I lost access. Sorry, team. Sorry, folks. Bear with me for a second as I closed out of too many windows all at once. And I am trying to find AirMeet. There we are. So I've went through our Slack channels to identify where our teams are and how Slack channels are looking, and I don't see all of the Slack channels for all of the teams that are on GitHub. So if you have created a team and have not used the team notation in the front, please make sure that you use team so that way folks can find your teams easily. And if you haven't yet created a Slack channel for your team, please make sure that is created as well. And again, if you need support creating that GitHub repository, feel free to reach out to Matt or I, and we can support you in getting that uploaded. With that, some good stuff to know is that next week we'll be talking about data ethics with Stella Lee. Our xAPI party the registration is open and on our website. We meet here every week at 2 p.m. via AirMeet. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email xapicohort@torrancelearning.com or shoot me a message in Slack. With that, I hope that you have an awesome Thursday and even greater weekend. And I look forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Have a great day.